Imagine never experiencing pain, never experiencing illness, never being tired again. Whew. Never feeling the shame of sin or the limitations of our physical weakness. And for those of us that suffer chronic illness or chronic pains or disabilities, the effect of aging is gone. I mean, that gives us hope. You know, we live in a world that's full of endings. The kids this week just spent a whole week at drama camp and did a play. Hold on here. Did a play that had all these different parts of the Bible woven into it. And so as we were watching it, but it was set in medieval times. It was a great play. They get their scripts and they work on them. And then beginning on Monday, they start putting it together. So within a week, by Friday, not even a full week, and by 5 days, they have a full play that they're able to put on. And they also, the high school kids also hope the younger kids do a play on Friday night. But you know, that comes to an end. Yesterday, after we fed them all, and they do it with this traveling group that comes around. They come to all these different places for like 12 weeks. Every week they're at a different church, a different homeschooling group, and they do this play. And they bring all the sets and everything with them. But at the end of the week, it's done. We live in a world where things end. We watch, in the fall, we watch the autumn leaves fall, and the trees go dormant. The seasons change. Our lives fade. I can't do what I used to do when I was 20, even though I try. And end up hurting myself. It's not how I did this. This just happened. But we realize as we get older, we can't do what we used to do. And those things seem to go away. And this all testifies to the reality of decay and of death. And yet, at the heart of Christianity lies this radical claim that defies the narrative of the world that there is an ending. That death is not final. Now, we've been in the book of 1 Corinthians, and Paul has been confronting many things in this church. It's a church that has a lot of problems. In the midst of chapter 15, he's talking about skeptics. He's talking to these skeptics who mocked the idea that there was a resurrection. We talked last week about why that might have been. It might have been because of a cultural thing, because they looked at the body as somewhat less than the spirit. So why would you resurrect something like this? You know? They saw it as an absurd thing, and it's like trying to reconcile our modern doubts about miracles. There's a lot of people that believe that miracles today can't happen. And we know they still do. Our God is a God of miracles. And there's today, especially, there's still this tension between science and the Bible. But Paul is going to answer with a very strong and powerful vision that redefines hope itself. These verses, though, are not just about what happens after we die. It's more about the resurrected body. What is the body going to be like? How is it going to be different than what it is today? So Paul's going to take us on this journey through seeds and stars and the very fabric of creation to show us the power of God. How God has the power to do anything. And it shouldn't surprise us that he can transform these broken bodies into something even more glorious than we could ever imagine. From the decomposition of a log that falls to the ground to the birthing of a whole new ecosystem of caterpillars and butterflies, bugs. For those of us that are weighed down by chronic pain, Paul's going to offer us a hope, a lifeline. your body is not the dead end. Now we know that when Jesus was resurrected, his body still bore the scars. He still had scars where the nails were put in, and I believe it was more like, if he put it here, it would have ripped his hand off. I think it was more here. And the scars in his feet and the scars in his side. We know that because Thomas, remember what Thomas said? Thomas said he wouldn't believe until he stuck his fingers in there. So Jesus showed him where they were. Understand that Jesus still bears the scars of the price he paid. And yet, his body radiates a divine life that one day we will reflect that image in ways that we can't even imagine. Not wishful thinking, not hopes and prayers. This is the very logic of God. This makes complete sense to God that he would do this. God turns seeds into forest. Think about that. A seed, sometime in the past, a seed dropped, and years later, it's a forest. He turns dust into humanity. We were made of dust, and he created man. So let's look at this. And the hope is that this will reshape how we look at our lives and how we look at the end of our lives. What is our purpose? And it should change our whole view of eternity. So let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 15. We're going to start in verse 35. Here's what Paul says. He says, but he's been talking about the resurrection. He's been talking about the resurrection of our bodies, not the resurrection of Jesus. He's really talking about the resurrection of our bodies in the end. He said, but someone will ask, how are the dead raised? With what kind of body do they come? Now, I want you to understand that this is probably not just genuine curiosity of the people asking the question. They are skeptical. They do not believe that the body will be resurrected. It's a challenge. This is clearly impossible in their eyes. They think it's impossible that the body could be raised. So Paul, explain to me. If you say it's going to happen, then tell me how is it going to happen? What will it look like? Well, we have that skepticism today between science and the Bible, creation and evolution. And no, I don't believe in evolutionary creation. I believe the earth was created in 7 days, that the earth is roughly 10,000 years old. That's another thing that people doubt. Is it between 6 and 10,000, or is it 4.5 billion? I always tell people, listen, the earth was created with the look of age. When God created Adam, was he created as a baby or a full-grown man? What came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, the chicken, obviously. Animals are created at an age. The earth was created looking as if it was aged, not as if it had just been created. There's this question today about miracles and natural law. Well, how can we have miracles? Because they defy the law of nature. A doctor comes to someone and says, you're dying. There's nothing we can do for you. And in a few days, they are miraculously, they're healed. There's nothing scientific to explain what happened, short of a miracle of God. It happens. What we have to remember, and I heard this, actually the person who said this, that I heard this from, was Mel Gibson, the actor who directed The Passion of the Christ. He said, this is what he says, he says, we have a God who created the law of nature. God is above the law. God does not have to follow the law of nature. God does as he wishes. And he's powerful enough to do more than the law of nature allows. And the question that these people are asking is, it reveals that they're very materialistic, they're very worldly, they're stuck in their materialism. And not just that they're stuck with talking about, possessions, but they're stuck with the physical body. They're thinking just in physical body terms. And it's a struggle for them to conceive how God could have the power that was beyond natural processes, because naturally our bodies decay. I feel it every day. I feel a little bit of my body decaying a little bit more every day. How did I hurt myself? I have no idea. I wasn't doing anything when it happened. I just woke up and actually I just stood up. And all of a sudden, I couldn't move my leg. The only thing I could think is progressive. I was sick, coughing. I had to climb a ladder for a while to fix some things. I had to crawl down on the ground to fix some things. And I just think progressively it happened. When I was 20 years old, that never would happen. But I'm 58, and those things happen. Huh? Oh, I know. Wait till I get older. That's why I have kids. I'm going to teach them how to do all this stuff. But you see, it's naturally for people to doubt. We look at our bodies. But see, Scripture affirms to us that God has the ability to do the seemingly impossible. Back in the book of Jeremiah, in Jeremiah 32:27, there's where it says, "Behold, I am the Lord, the God of all flesh." See, he's not just the God. That's an interesting turn of phrase there. He's not just the God of man. He's the God of all flesh, all of creation. He's the God of animals, birds, insects, fish, humans, all of it. He says, "Is anything too hard for me?" I love how God always ends with a question. Is anything too hard for me? No. The answer is no. So when we face doubts about the resurrection, we have to remember that the same God who created all of creation out of nothing, nobody else can do that. Man certainly can't, though he's tried. That same God can certainly restore and transform our bodies after death and at resurrection. So here's how Paul responds to them. He said, "You foolish person, what you sow does not come to life unless it dies." We'll explain that. "And what you sow is not the body that is to be, but a bare kernel, perhaps of wheat or some other grain. But God gives it a body as he has chosen, and to each kind of seed its own body." So Paul doesn't mince words here. He's looking at the skeptic and he says, "You fool." And that word actually means ignorant. You ignorant person. You're not just foolish. You don't even know what you're talking about. You think you do, but you don't. He says the natural world shows us examples of transformation after death. He says, what you sow does not come to life unless it dies. I was going to bring some seeds. I didn't grab some seeds. But you look at a seed, it looks dead. Have you ever seen a beet seed? A beet seed is like got all these spikes on it. It looks like it's dry. It looks like it's dead. What could it do? But when you put it in the ground and you water it and you care for it, what does it do? It grows. He says, that's why he says, what you sow does not come to life unless it dies. And what you sow is not the body that is to be, but a bare kernel, perhaps of wheat or some other grain. But what does it become? It becomes a plant. Jesus himself, back in the book of John chapter 12, verse 24, says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit." Now, I believe in that verse, Jesus is talking about himself. His death and resurrection bore much fruit. But think about planting an apple seed. You get an apple seed and you put it in the ground. What emerges from that seed is not another seed at first, right? A little shoot comes out, a little green shoot comes up. And as it grows and grows, it becomes a hard tree. And sooner or later, it produces fruit. And what's in the middle of that fruit? A seed. I mean, that's got to be a God thing. But see, that seed does not produce another seed till much later. It first dies in the ground and produces a tree that bears fruit. But there's still continuity between the tree and the seed. If you take an expert who looks at the tree and you show them a seed that's an apple seed, they'll say, yeah, that's an apple seed. We know. There's a connection between the two. But that's just one connection. Think about all the other connections. What about a caterpillar and a butterfly? What does it do? It makes a cocoon around itself, and you'd swear it was dead. It's dry, but when it comes out, it's a beautiful butterfly. Dead trees, when they fall to the ground and they start rotting, there's an ecosystem that develops around it. All these bugs come in and start living in it, and it actually creates fertilizer for the next growth to come. Animal carcasses that decompose within weeks, they add nutrients to the soil and encourages new life in the plants. The biggest problem I think we have today, especially out in the West, is we're not allowing forest fires to happen. If a forest fire happens, there are certain plants that cannot survive unless there's a fire. The heat from the fire opens the pods for the seeds to come out. And this is very interesting, something I saw this week. If you take half a lemon, you stick it in a jar, and you cover it with dirt, within 20 days, that lemon will become green and decompose. But you know what else happens? Off of that, those seeds start feeding on that decomposition, and a lemon tree will grow. God takes something that is dead, decomposing, and what does he do? He brings new life to it. See, similarly, our resurrected bodies will be recognizable. When we are all resurrected, and I hope we're all there, when we're resurrected, we will recognize ourselves. I'm not sure. I don't think I'll look like I do today. I think I'll look like I did when I was younger. I'm hoping. Thin, no gray hair. I have blonde hair again. I think. I'm just guessing. But we'll not only just recognize us, we'll recognize everyone. I'll know everybody. And not just everybody in this room, we'll know everybody. So even though our bodies will be changed, it's going to be gloriously transformed, it's still going to be recognizable. See, that should remind us that death is not the end. Death is this transition of flesh to celestial bodies.